and ask him. I'm going to ask him, is it okay if we record you, Dean Stamos, part one? And part two, how did you get here? How did you end up being a dean? Was that always in your plan?
Not even close to it. No. I joined UCI in 2020. I'm sorry, 2002. Sorry, 2021. So 21 years ago, just with the dream of starting a division. I was a division chief on day one of a division of one person, which was me. So I had the dream of building a division under the CDDC, which I then did. I got sidetracked by being asked to serve as interim chair. And, in reality, I didn't aspire to be a chair, but I probably did in the back of my mind, only because the people I admired and looked up to in my career at that point had been chairs, right? So it was a job I could see myself emulating in a position. So did it for about a year and a half, and then a chair was recruited into UCI. At that time, I had thrown my hat in the ring, but it turns out I didn't get chosen, and it was probably the best thing that happened to me and to the department, because they brought in somebody more qualified and more ready. And that person wasn't threatened by me, and I learned a lot with that person. And then when they left after about 4.5 years, they anointed me as the chair apparent, if you would. I had been the vice chair with that person, and then became the chair in 2010. And I thought I was at the pinnacle of my career. I had no desire to do anything other than that. And then I was asked to step in as interim dean in 2016. And so had it happen, I answered the phone. And I have a hard time saying no. And so after giving it some deliberation over the weekend, I said yes, with the belief that it would be temporary. That was the commitment and the promise. And then after about 10 months, they quit looking and they started working me over, and the rest is history.
And we're glad for it. So we already have a question. What was the process that led you to your dream of building a division before becoming the dean?
Well, it was basically my specialty is colorectal surgery, and if you go to Philadelphia or Chicago or the East Coast, those are all well established in academic centers. But in California, there were no academic colorectal surgeons. So when I came to California in 1991 and went to Harvard, UCLA, I was the first trained and board certified colorectal surgeon in an academic position in California, which is kind of weird and unusual, but that's the way it was. So it really was about establishing credibility for my specialty within an academic institution. That was my goal or my dream.
All right. Thank you, Dean Stamos. We'd like to ask Dr. Coleen Cunningham the same question about how you got into your role as a chair. Was it planned or was it serendipity?
So early on in my career, I was adamant I was not going to go into leadership, because the leaders that I knew sat around and did nothing. And I was just like, why would anybody want to do that? And so I was just the worker bee. But I realized that if you're just the worker bee and you're not willing to help get things done, then you don't have you don't have a voice in how things are done. And so over time, I gradually, started getting more involved, and I felt like the more information you get, the more you're able to influence things, advocate for yourself, advocate for other people. And so it was a gradual increase. And then I moved from SUNY Upstate to Duke as take on the chief of Peds ID role. And there I found that it was really fun to build a division. It was really fun to mentor junior people and to really watch them blossom into leaders. And so then when it came time to think about being a chair, by then it was very strategic. I was like, okay, that's my next step. That's what I need to do. So what skills do I need to build? Where do I need to gain experience? Where do I need to gain skills? Where do I need to gain credibility? And so then from that point on, I started really seeking out training opportunities, books, coaches, figuring out what I needed to do to move to this position. And I came to UCI in 2021 as chair of pediatrics and then pediatrician in chief at CHOP. And you know, that was, I was committed at that point to taking on a leadership role because I love watching the faculty blossom, and I love watching people move forward. And I see that's the role of a leader, is to have everybody within their department or division or whatever become successful. If it's about you being successful, then it's not going to succeed. If it's about everybody else being successful, then you're going to see incredible accomplishments.
Dr. Cunningham, just to ask you a further question. You said you were very strategic about when you decided you wanted to be a chair. So when you made that decision, and then when you started applying and looking and then getting those skill sets you mentioned by going to courses and getting a coach, how long did that take, and how did you find these resources?
I would say it took 5 or 6 years. I attended ELAM, which is Executive Leadership in Academic Medicine. I also took advantage of at that point I was at Duke, and so a couple times a year there were various leadership classes that you could try to squeeze into the day, like there was negotiating, and there's a whole bunch of them. So anytime there was an opportunity, I took advantage of it. Anytime somebody suggested a book to read, I would read it. I would talk to leaders. And part of ELAM, I don't know if anybody on this, well, Daniela is part of it because we were in the same class as ELAM. But a part of it is, you know, they have you go out and meet with all the leaders in your institution and talk to them about their pathway and talk to them about how they got there. And so there's just all kinds of opportunities to understand what it takes and think about how to build that.
That is great information. And then Dr. Bota, would you like to share your journey and pathway?
Yeah, I'm glad to. I would say that for me, it wasn't initially about having a role as a dean or a chair or a division chief. But what I knew from very early on is that I want to be able to really apply my research to patients. And a lot of the things that I have done were around my passion for my career. So when I finished my fellowship at Duke in neuro-oncology, I knew, and I was already an MD PhD, I knew that I want to build a research program that was able to do both laboratory research and clinical research. And I want to make it in such a way that is nimble and it can accomplish a lot of very lofty goals that I am afraid that were not accomplished even today. And then the way on which I thought that I will accomplish it, and that's probably one of the worst decisions and best decisions that I took in my life, was to accept to come directly out of the fellowship as a program director and division chief, very much like Dean Stamos said, a division chief of one, at the same time of trying to open a lab. And that was a very fast lesson on the mistakes that you can do in leadership. So I got to learn, and I was very grateful for that. As I became an associate professor, the year after, in 2015, I also became the vice chair of neurology for faculty affairs. I had the opportunity to work with your office in that capacity. And at that time, I realized that I need to be more strategic about learning what it is to be a leader. It was the right time in my career. I went for training with the American Academy of Neurology for the mid-career faculty. Their program was called Transforming Leader Program. And there I learned about ELAM. About the same time, I was offered the opportunity to be the director of the Alpha Clinic at UCI, working with Dr. Anderson, and the medical director for the Stem Cell Research Center. So the people that I was trying to support on clinical research, once of the sudden became much more than my division. And after having the opportunity at ELAM to meet with many leaders of our medical school, it was offered to me the opportunity to actually to try to make right a lot of the things that I thought were wrong in clinical trials and clinical research at UCI. And it has become such a fun journey to try to create novel systems and novel opportunities, and really to serve the faculty and try to move all of us together to the next level. So it is, I think it is about the passion. Follow your passion, and then while you're following your passion, you're going to have to make some compromises and become more educated and involved in leadership.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Bota. And we can clearly hear the passion there. So what other traits, aside from passion, what traits or characteristics, Dean Stamos, will return back to you? What are you looking for in a strategic leader in the healthcare field?
Well, I think at a basic level, it's somebody who's going to get the job done, right? So somebody who's got a proven track record of getting things done. You know, we used to say the best way to get asked to be on a committee or involved with something is to say yes and then do a good job, and then they'll ask you again. And it tends to be a repetitive event, right? The more you do, the better you do, the more often you're asked to do it, right? So that's one thing. I think you have to have, you know, to me, the most important skill is to have great emotional intelligence and to have perspective, right? And perspective in my mind also means respect for everybody else, right? So perspective meaning that if somebody's doing something you think is stupid or wrong, it's probably not accurate. It's probably more likely just seeing it from a different perspective. So being able to take yourself out of your position, put yourself in their position, understand why they're being motivated to do what they're doing. Typically, people do things for a reason. And so I think being able to understand that and understand it and respect it and support it, I think is important. I think ability to learn from your mistakes and not be afraid to admit a mistake and learn from it and not make the same mistake again. It's sort of the fundamentals, if you would, of morbidity and mortality conference, right? That's why we did that, was let someone else make the mistake, you can learn from it, and then you can avoid making that mistake. Or if you do make a mistake, which we all do, try not to make it again, right? That's the part that's not forgivable.
All right. Go ahead, Namisha.
I was going to ask Dr. Bota or Dr. Cunningham, do you have anything to add on characteristics or traits that you are looking for in a strategic leader in healthcare and academic medicine?
So I want to just emphasize what Dean Stamos said about emotional intelligence. I think it's something I didn't fully appreciate when I was a junior faculty member, and it's critical. You have to build that, and you have to have it. But I'd say the other thing is, I think you really have to be about building your team. If it's all about you, you become the right lane and step. If it's all about building your team, you can do so much more. So I would just say that's really important perspective for people.
Not just compassion. A lot of the people around us, almost everybody works very hard. What we do in the medical school, each of us, it's not easy. It's not easy on your mind. It's not easy on our day-to-day existence. And to just profoundly understand the people around you, and sometimes to be able to remember about the struggles that you had in your own personal life and personal career, and be able to empathize with the people around you. And to switch to a more scientific point, I would say it's also very important to have really long-term vision, because sometimes things are struggling in the immediate present, but if we think what is our long-term vision, it's a little bit easier to make sure that we maintain the course.
All right. Thank you. So let's again, who wants to jump in first and say, we'll come back to this, I think, near the end, is what other training opportunities available, because we've heard ELAM and a couple of things mentioned, but what are the downsides of leadership? Who wants to jump in and say, and admit that there possibly might be a downside?
Okay, I'll jump in first.
Who will be the leader and step up first?
I'll jump in first. All right. What's the downside of leadership? Well, you know, I mean, there's a couple things, right? One is that it can leave you with less friends. I mean that in a sincere way also, right? Like, people are sometimes afraid to be your friend if you're also their boss, right? So that's one issue just to think about. And if you are a temporary leader, i.e. an interim, and then you have to return back to the faculty like I did at least once in my career, that can be a bit challenging, right? Because you've got to treat people one way, and then you turn around and all of a sudden now they're your peer again, right? So just something to think about how you behave and how you interact. And again, going back to the issue of keeping respect foremost. And then, if you get into a leadership position too young, you might be in a position of saying, well, what's next, right? Because most leadership positions don't last for, 15, 20, 25 years, right? And then some of them do, but you can't count on that. So you got to always have an exit ramp or a plan B as to what you're going to do next if it doesn't work out.
I would say that we all have to be mindful if we want to maintain another interest outside of the leadership, by example, maintaining a research program, that sometime having a leadership position could cost the time that you need, and you might not be able to maintain a very, very well-funded research group or laboratory group in the same time as you are able to support the leadership position and support the other faculty.
Or you may not be able to do as much clinical care as you want to do. So I do think that there's a finite number of hours in a day, and if you're going to add a whole bunch more hours as being a leader, then you're going to have to decrease your hours doing other things. So I think that's just something to take into consideration. But I think it's very rewarding. I don't want to make it sound like it's like this huge sacrifice there.
But that's a really good point, Dr. Cunningham, in terms of something has to give, right? Otherwise, you will not have what you need to have, which is work-life balance, right? So if you're going to take on a new role, you got to figure out what can I give up to be able to take this on? Because typically, most of us already have a full plate before we take on a new role, right? And so rather than just take on a new role and then not be able to do a great job or not be able to do a great job somewhere, right? Either at home or at work, right? You can do that for a short while, but after a while you can't. And so you've always got to be thinking to yourself, what can I give away? What can I get rid of? What can I release that is not going to create a hardship for somebody else immediately, and then will also be good for my own career and my own future in order to do this new job. Otherwise, you really shouldn't take it on, because if you're not really ready or willing to give up something, it's a recipe for, I think, failure.
I want to make one other point about leadership, and it's not a direct response to your question, but I want to make sure we don't forget it. Every single person on this Zoom call is a leader. Every single physician is a leader. And whether you say, I never want to be a division chief or a department chair or a dean, you are still a leader, and you need to build your leadership skills, and you need to embrace the fact that you're a leader, and you need to think about where you're leading people to. Because, and I say this because I think early in my career, I had no appreciation for that. And I didn't know, it's like, if I had a really grumpy day, then, I was leading people to grumpiness. Like, think about the fact that people are following you. You are a leader, and you need to embrace it, and you need to develop it, even if you never want to have a titled role. So it's just one of the most important things that I think about leadership.
So I wanted to switch gears, and then we've talked about about your journeys and what characteristics you look forward to. And we'll talk about skills and training a little bit later, but we wanted to ask the group, this is kind of more nitty gritty as it pertains to your leadership styles and at UCI, is how are selections of vice chairs, division chiefs, medical directors, associate deans, how's that process done? So a lot of the people on the group today are, assistant clinical professors. We have some associates, and then we have some full professors. So I think it would be nice if you could all share that with us.
I'm not sure that there's one way. I think the way people stand out as leaders is they take on responsibility, and they show the ability to get things done, as I think Stamos pointed out before. But the process, a division chief could be an internal search, it could be an external search, it could be there's a lot of different processes, but the first step is establishing that you have a track record of being able to lead people and get things done.
I would also add that when we look, at least in the Office of Research, for partners, we always look for people that have a proven track record of service. It is very hard to be chosen as a leader if you have not already proven or started to prove that you are of service to your division, to your department, to your school. And I think it's important, at least in my mind, as people progress with their career, to talk to their division chiefs, department chairs, the other people in the leadership, and express their intention to have opportunities in leadership. Leadership right now, it's not only those structural positions that are always in the School of Medicine, from the department to the division and to the dean's office. There are numerous leadership positions in the healthcare system and in the School of Medicine that are not the classical titled positions, but they are very good training grounds for the next steps in the people's career, and maybe to discover what is their passion and leadership as well.
So Dean Stamos, we got to ask you, what about vice deans and senior associate deans? How does that selection process work?
Yeah, so I'll back up a little bit and say that what's been described so far is what we've done in the past, right? It's who's proven the ability, who's proven the interest, and that may not be the best way, because it's not always equitable as much as we try to make it so. And so we're trying to become a little more structured in that regard. And I think, certainly standing up different leadership academies like the SAIL program, the Women's Leadership Academy, I now keep a copy of all the graduates of that at my desk. And then when we have opportunities, we try to look to those people who have proven, to me at least, that they have a passion, interest. Okay, they haven't necessarily proven they have a talent, but they have interest enough to spend their time getting more training and expressing interest in leadership roles. So that's great. And then we have copied a little bit of what the health system has been doing for the last 5 years or so, what they call the 9-box program. And we set up what's called the Advanced Leadership Academy. And this is a pretty new process, but the idea is to identify within our confines people who have real leadership potential, and also look at positions that might be coming open in the near future, and start thinking ahead of time about succession planning rather than waiting for a reaction after it's already happened or when we find out it's happened. And I've been encouraging all of our leaders to think about succession planning for their own position as well. I think that's critical. So I think we can do a better job of being more thoughtful and strategic about it rather than reactive. When I stepped into the dean's role, what people may not realize is I was interim dean, and at that time we had a vice chancellor of health affairs who had also been the dean, and so my cabinet, if you would, was pretty empty, literally and figuratively, right? And so, and we had a couple of people who were senior associate deans. We didn't have any vice deans back then. And these were people who were, getting close to the end of their career. And so I had to repopulate that whole cabinet with people who could get the job done. And we've made some changes over the last 7 years in that grouping. But I think we've done a pretty good job of selection, because I think our current vice deans are just phenomenal. And I'm not just biased because 2 of them are on here with me, but I really think they're phenomenal and working together as a team. And so, but there was a selection process that went on for all of them with a number of different people considered, really just using my internal think tank with the trusted people around me to help select the people in the roles. But again, I think in the future we'll be a little more strategic about that.
The other thing that can be done, and I think is done often, is having open calls. So like, letting people know, hey, this position is going to open up. If you're interested, consider applying. because, you know, sometimes you just don't know people in a different department or a different, you know, there's people that are under the radar, and open calls for even for internal searches is a helpful way to make sure that you know people that are interested.
And we've done that quite a bit recently. Daniela and Jeff can comment on that at the associate dean level, as I think many of you have seen those and replied to those. And so I think that's right.
Yes, and that's an amazing opportunity also. I would say that even if maybe you don't feel that you are ready for that position, putting your name forward. Sometimes we are maybe more modest, not seeing the whole value that we can bring, but also because it's important, as I said before, to identify your passion and let the other people know what your passion is.
Yeah, so I would add to that is that, in fact, what happens is when there's an open call and multiple people put their application in, and then someone gets selected to be that, whatever that leadership position is, the people who didn't get selected, they're now known to a committee of they're interested in leadership, and so they get approached the next time around. So that's a good way to get yourself noticed and move up the ladder. So let's move things in another direction again. How about with respect to diversity and gender parity and the loss of women in leadership? What are your suggestions? We'll start with Dean Stamos. Put you on the spot. What's your suggestion for improving parity and retaining folks?
So I'm not sure what you mean by loss of women in leadership, but I'll answer the question the best I can, unless you want to elaborate on that.
No, I don't have any specific person to point to. Just that, well, I will elaborate in the sense that there are more women than men getting a biology degree, more women than men getting a medical degree. But then as you move up the ladder, we're losing people to full professorships, or we don't have as many department chairs that are women as.
That's right. Okay, good. That makes sense now. Okay, that question makes sense. So as you ascend up the professorial rank, there are less women at the top of the pyramid than at the bottom of the pyramid, for sure. And some of that is temporally related, that is timing, right? And some of that is because of other pressures and other decisions that are made, and a lack of support of women faculty at the junior and mid-career positions, right? So we've got to do a better job of keeping them engaged and involved. And that also means flexibility for all the faculty who want flexibility early in their career and in their mid-career, and then allowing them an entryway back in at the senior level, and not losing them, because that really is bad for the organization. I think it's a multi-pronged approach to improve diversity and gender equity across the enterprise, and we just have to keep working at it. I mean, we have had a couple of searches that we've sent back to the search committee or to the search firm because we didn't have enough of a diverse candidate pool. And at the end of the day, in my opinion, you have to look for a diverse candidate pool and then choose the best person, right? You can't be looking for a specific target. You can focus on that target. You can make sure you advertise to that target, whatever that is: diversity, gender, seniority, experience, et cetera. But at the end of the day, when you end up with your short list of the top 3 or 4 candidates, you have to choose the best person for the position. And that needs to be, if you would, agnostic to those factors. Otherwise, you'll not be doing anybody any favors, or you will not be fair to anybody, including somebody who you might choose who's not as qualified of a candidate. So I think that's what I would say is just keep working at it. I think we're making progress, but not fast enough. I think things like the Prime LC and the Lead ABC program are great in terms of diversity. They've done a wonderful job of diversifying our medical student class. We now have made lots of efforts in the last couple of years at trying to diversify our resident and fellow pool. In some ways, using that candidacy from Prime LC and Lead ABC to keep them here, but also to allow our candidates that come in to recognize what kind of an environment we're trying to build, right? An accepting, diverse environment. And then the hardest part is the faculty. We know that. It's not just at UCI, it's across the country. UCI is particularly difficult because of local demographics, but we have lots of opportunities.
So this is a topic we could talk about for the whole rest of the time, but it's every step of the way that we do things that could discourage women and underrepresented minorities. So one is just starting from recruitment. You know, who do you reach out and say, wow, you're doing a terrific job. I really hope you stay for residency, or I really hope you stay for fellowship. It's reaching out and actively recruiting people from diverse backgrounds. But it's also giving people a chance to fail. And an example that I can point out is, you know, so say somebody, you know, now has 2 or 3 kids and they just finished their fellowship, and you're the chair and you say, oh, I don't want to stress her because she just had all these kids, so I'm going to give Joe this chance to lead this little thing in the bottom. Not because I think poorly of Susie, but because, you know, she's got those 3 kids. I don't want to put more pressure on her. She's really stressed. Oh, but now 2 years later, I have a leadership position. Who's got the leadership experience to move up? So we really have to carefully think about when we have opportunities. Don't assume that because somebody has young kids at home that they don't want that stretch. They don't want the extra thing. And then the other thing is just really making sure that we're doing everything to eliminate bias in the selection process. I mean, we're all biased. We all have biases, and it's really easy to identify who looks like a leader in our minds. And I think we really have to critically look at that and make sure that we're not letting that influence us.
You know, one thing I was remiss in not mentioning is the population of the search committee is critically important, as is the search committee chair. And so just really think hard about that. And we tried to be extra aware of that. It has a big influence.
I would like to add something maybe a little bit more personal, which is I think it's important for the people that are either from underrepresented backgrounds or women to be able to candidly talk about our experience with our junior colleague, with our senior colleagues, with the people at the same level, and be available as real persons that made real mistakes, made real choices, and be supportive. I think that a lot, at least of our junior female colleagues, I had the opportunity to talk and mentor many of them. Sometimes they just need to know that it was difficult for many of us, and also to help them find the support that exists. And I'll encourage everybody that's interested to ask for that help, to ask for that support. It is not either or. It's true that I think it's a question later about life-work balance, and I want to ask which balance. But we exist as a community, and we should be supporting each other as a community. And I really encourage everybody to think that way and feel that they're part of the community and come and ask for help when they need help.
Dr. Cunningham.
One more thing I wanted to add is women are more likely than men in general to have imposter syndrome, or to not be willing to put their name in the hat until they think they're super qualified. Whereas men may be willing to put their name in the hat when they're barely qualified. Again, I know this is a generalization, but in general, women are more likely to have imposter syndrome influence their willingness to push up in that position. So I think the other thing we need to do is encourage people. Let people know they're talented. Let people know they have those leadership skills, and really encourage the people that are sort of reluctant leaders to step up.
So now we wanted to
sorry, Namish, I just wanted to remind people that in fact in 2024 we'll have an entire session a month on Mondays on imposter syndrome. So look to our 2024 calendar coming out soon. Sorry, shameless, needless advertisement. Take it away, Namisha.
So we talked about how selection processes are made. We talked about addressing the problem of, or addressing the issue of gender and diversity, parity, leadership. We wanted to ask the group, how is leadership evaluated at UCI? Like, what are the processes, and how can faculty contribute to that?
So that's very structured at UCI for anybody department chair or higher. And we have recently, Jeff Abbott, thank you for all the great help. Brian Cummings, thank you for all the great help. Instituted division chief reviews every 5 years. So everybody in the University of California system, from a department chair all the way up, including the president of the entire university, Michael Drake, undergoes a 5-year review. And it's a very structured process. Basically, any, if you would, constituent at the same level above you or below you is offered the opportunity to make comments and to weigh in. I'll let Jeff and Brian make further comments about the process, because Brian actually and Jeff manage that process for the School of Medicine, for the chairs and for the division chiefs.
Dr. Abbott.
Yep, so I can. So Namisha does the division chief, and Brian does the department chair reviews now. So basically, what happens is for the department chair reviews, we go to campus and we agree who's up for that five-year review. The department chair gets a notice that we're requesting a lot of materials off them that demonstrate their achievements, metrics, and data over the last 5 years. We send out a survey to stakeholders ranging from even students all the way through to dean's office people, leadership, other department chairs, etc. And then we have we select an unbiased and independent panel with diverse composition to review all the materials, the surveys, the chair materials that come in. And they'll make a recommendation based on their discussion. That'll be facilitated by a dean's office person, but the dean's office person will not participate other than to facilitate and answer questions. And then those recommendations get summarized and go through to Dean Stamos and or Vice Dean John Gross when we discuss the recommendations. So that's the way we do it. I think it's a fair process. There's lots of stakeholders allowed to have input, and we balance all that. And I think the division chief reviews have been something that there was a little bit of consternation when we first started implementing them. But overall, I strongly believe they empower the chairs to make measured decisions and give them data by which they can, make a fair and measured decision, rather than us getting involved in the final decision-making process. They're about giving the chairs they need to make decisions about their own division chief. So same goes for associate deans and vice deans. We just have to do those slightly differently. But again, it's a process with a committee, and stakeholders get to have their input. So, and then our recommendations go up depending on the level of person being reviewed. They go up to maybe the provost or Dean Stamos has final say, or department chair has final say.
Yeah, just to be clear. So first of all, thank you, Namisha, for the division chief work. You may want to comment as well, your experience. And we haven't made it to every division chief yet because we haven't had the bandwidth, but also because some of them haven't been in a position for more than 5 years. And that had never been done before at UCI. And really the intention of the division chief review was not to bring that up to the level of the dean's office. It was actually to provide the chairs with information they could then use to make decisions about maintaining or changing the division chief. And I've been encouraging more frequent change, because otherwise we're never going to improve diversity, right? If we have a steady state that never changes, you'll never change diversity. And I think it's important that we give not just women in URM, but also younger people a chance, right? And if you have somebody who's been a division chief for 25 years, which we have a few of those, then how's anybody else ever going to have a chance to break in and get experience and then therefore make it up to the level of a department chair or a dean? And if we don't do that, shame on us. And also, we are now limiting the opportunities for those faculty, but also probably going to lose some faculty because they'll go somewhere else to have those opportunities if we can't give it to them here.
Right. At retention, we are also doing, exit interview surveys, and we're very concerned about retention as well in the dean's office. So I would just add to what Dr. Abbott said, is that this review process, not only is it anonymous, but there's like a NIH review type of panel. There's a primary reviewer and a secondary reviewer, and they draft reports and share them with a committee that is chaired by an associate dean. But as Dr. Abbott said, we don't vote on them. We just orchestrate it, make sure that the review process is happening. Then we do write a summary letter and help them write a summary letter to report up the chain. But it's a very democratic type of process when it's handled the way it's supposed to be handled.
And also the just to mention a couple of other things, we asked the Senate, we asked the School of Medicine Executive Committee for input on who the reviewers will be as well. So we get their advice on that. And people don't review their own department chairs.
Dr. Breck?
I was just going to echo what Brian said. It's the same process on division chief reviews as mentioned for the chair reviews. We use the same exact process.
I just wanted to make sure that it's also understood, though, we all go through every 5-year reviews, that actually also in the dean's office, we do have every year our benchmarks and our goals. And we get reviewed every 6 months to make sure that we have reached the benchmarks that we have established together. And if we are tracking behind, there is responsibility, and there are plans to be made to try to make sure that we get back on track. So the review is continuous, and that's very good, because otherwise it would be hard when we get to the 5-year benchmark to make sure that we are on track and we're achieving what it's more of a long-term plan.
And then each of the chairs meets with myself and Chad Lefteris, our CEO, on an annual basis to set up goals for the subsequent year, which is important for their evaluation and also important for their incentive bonuses.
So thank you for bringing that up, because that leads us to one of our pre-selected questions from the audience. How does compensation work for leaders, and is it enough for the added work that the leaders have to do?
Speaking for myself, no.
It is necessary, but not sufficient, like the algorithms.
No, it's all about trying to achieve equity, right? And at the end of the day, we've tried hard to value all of our missions. So we say discover, teach, and heal, right? We've tried to make sure that everybody is compensated fairly for their efforts. That doesn't mean everything you do gets compensated, but it means if you take on a major role that occupies 10% or more of your week on an average basis, that you're getting paid the same as you would get for doing clinical work during that time period, right? Doesn't mean including all your incentive bonuses and everything else, but at least your base salary with your Y. So your XX prime and Y should be matched by what you're getting for doing that job. And we've tried to stay with that process and that principle. I think it's important. And whether you're a dean scholar and you're educating our medical students, or whether you're an associate dean of research, we try to stick with that principle. You can always make more money seeing more patients and doing clinical work, right? That's the way our incentives are set up. But we try to take away any really perverse incentives, if you would, or disincentives to getting people to be willing to do the work that's really important for us to make progress.
So I just want to add that I'm a pediatric infectious disease doctor. So anything is an improvement over what a pediatric infectious disease doctor gets paid. So, I get paid more than I would do if I was just seeing patients.
That's a topic for a whole nother session of compensation based on what department you're in. Dr. Parekh, do you want to ask something different, or?
Sure. Why don't we talk about skills and training? Because we did have a couple questions from the faculty beforehand. So I guess one question you guys had all listed different traits and characteristics, speaking on specifically of emotional intelligence, but what about some of the other, I guess, what we would call harder skills or didactic skills? Do you think an MBA or attending a specific leadership course is useful? Where can our faculty get some of these skills? I know we've already mentioned a couple leadership training programs that are within the School of Medicine of SAIL and in the Advanced Leadership Program, but any other thoughts?
I'll start out by saying take advantage of every opportunity you get.
Yeah.
And don't underestimate the value of experience, right? As long as you're willing to learn, willing to make mistakes, willing to acknowledge you made a mistake and course correct and look for mentorship to support you. It's all additive. Is an MBA necessary? It all depends what you want to do. I mean, and it also depends where you want to do it. And so what I mean by that is if you are at an institution where you're well known and recognized and you've worked hard, it's less important to have those advanced degrees than it is if you want to go to another institution that doesn't know you. That's assuming you've done a good job, obviously.
I think that's important to think what you want to do and then try to make sure that you have the skills for it. There are some common course if you want to have a leadership career in education, maybe considering to get yourself educated, maybe to a level of a master in education or taking some of the classes. We all have advanced degrees. I'm not sure that always we need another advanced degree. If you want to go on medical economics, being able to have a good understanding of how healthcare works right now. If you want to go into medical policies, having an understanding of the law. But after you take all of those away, just learning about working with people, learning about how to manage change, learning how to deal sometimes with more difficult personalities, learning a few of the basic concepts about how to bring and to maintain an organization together, cohesiveness, and also how to deal with criticism and how to accept it and embrace it. So there are a lot of skills, and I know that many of our leadership academies included. I don't think it's a one best leadership academy, but getting more perspectives and maybe from more leadership classes or courses offered by different structures, it's, in my opinion, valuable.
So I don't have an MBA, so I don't know what I'm missing. Maybe I would do a whole lot better as a chair if I had an MBA. But I think you really just want to take advantage of every opportunity, and you want to read. I mean, there's a lot of really good books. One of my favorites is How to Win Friends and Influence People. It actually really gives you some really basic rules about, you know, how to value people that you're working with, how to show them and appreciate their work. But yeah, there's a ton of really good books to read.
Dr. Bota, Dean Stamos, do you have other books? So Dean Stamos is putting up Radical Candor as a book to read. Dr. Bota, do you have a favorite book?
I have a few of them. I think that Managing Change is one of my favorite ones. I had to be in leadership through a time of profound change for the people here that were through the building of the Center for Clinical Research. Maybe you remember that. Also, I like, when I want to be amused by things, to read Who Stole My Cheese? It gives you a great perspective about what's important in life, what you want to fight over, and, you know, the wars that you do not want to ever fight because they're not essential or important. Also, the Harvard Business Review has excellent series on leadership, and they go through different aspects. So if you are somebody that wants to learn at your own pace, I do recommend the leadership series from the Harvard Business Review.
The other really good book is Start With Why. I think that's the title. Or Know Your Why, Start With Why. It has why in the title. And it's just really good in thinking about how to move people forward in terms of getting down to the why of what they're doing.
I think we're going to collect these and place them on the faculty development website because I've been taking some notes. Sound like we got quite a few good ones. We have a question in the chat box. How many of you have had accelerated promotions in your career, and how did you accomplish that? At what stage in your career did you achieve an accelerated promotion?
So I never had accelerated promotions because I was I always had too much to do all the paperwork. So I wasn't at an institution like UCI where you have to do it at a certain time or like you get yelled at. Like it was like, okay, you're qualified for associate professor or you're qualified for professor. Get your paperwork in, and there was just so many other things to do. And I also had a lot of kids. So my promotions actually were relatively slow. Because I that wasn't that important to me, like what the title was. It was more important to get the work done. So I never had accelerated. I can't remember what year I became professor, but it took me a while.
I'm going to ask Jeff to answer that question. He's the most qualified right now to answer that question. And is it different now in the UC system based on the new pension than it used to be, Jeff, in terms of the importance of that? Back to what Dr. Cunningham said, and then I'm happy to.
In terms of accelerating and getting accelerated promotions.
Yeah.
So okay, I could talk for all evening on this one, but so there's a few. So look, I think it's important. I think it's particularly important for I'm going to say basic science faculty who don't have clinical revenue to get Z payments and things like that, and or Y components that come from their grants. I think it's really important to time promotions, and we're talking specifically if we're talking about promotion, i.e. going from assistant to associate or associate to full. It's really important to get those done at exactly the right time, but also it's very important to consider, do you really need to get accelerated into one of those? It's very difficult, right? There's two things when you go up. We see quite a lot of people trying to get accelerated for a tenure right now from assistant to associate. And I just feel like the most important thing by far is to get the tenure at the right time and when the timing's right for you. The part about getting an accelerated promotion, maybe going to a step higher than is the normal for that particular action, is not nearly as important, and it can cloud the issue. The most important thing is to secure tenure as a basic science person going through the ranks. Now, in terms of other accelerations, I think accelerated merits can be important for, again, increasing your base salary, but also making you feel as if you're getting treated properly by the UC system and getting your just rewards for all your hard work. If you've done exceptionally well in at least two of the categories of service, research, or teaching, I think it's right that you should feel like you can get rewarded for that, right? So I think it is important. It's not just about the money. It's about you feeling like you are valued in your job. But I will say it's supposed to be only 15% of people that get accelerated in a given cycle. So you shouldn't try and go up for it every time. Some types of accelerations, such as if you're in a 3-year review cycle, say you're a full professor and you can get reviewed every 3 years. If after 1 year you decide to go for a 2-year acceleration, those are off cycle. They create more work for you, your department, and the school. And they're very difficult to do because you have to do 3 years of work in 1 year, plus just add something else on top that makes it extra special, right? So I encourage people to time them, think about them, don't do them too often, and maybe think about timing it so you can go for an entire step acceleration, but only when the stars are really aligned, because then you're not creating any more work for yourself or your department. You're not doing it off cycle, and those are the ones that really you can see a large result from, right? You're jumping an entire step, but everything's got to be perfect. So I think it's important. Look, it's important that you feel valued at UCI, and when you've done exceptionally well in the last few years, I think it's really important that you get recognized for that. But don't try and go up too often. And I would advise mostly against accelerated promotions because you're kind of conflating two issues there, and it can get complicated and distract people from the really important part, which is the actual promotion itself, not an extra step or going up super early. So that would be my recommendations and advice.
So I would go for what Coleen said first, to say that I had only one acceleration, and that was full disclosure after I almost failed my promotion. So it was nice after a big failure to try to go again and try to build your self-esteem. I do not recommend failing things to try to accelerate after that, but life works that way. For our Senate faculty, especially because here we are almost all of us clinicians, for the people on inline, in residence, clinical X, especially for the promotion from assistant to associate, it is the same for us like the tenure for basic science faculty. It is much more important to be able to go to the associate level and not having to consider a transition to another series, usually a clinical series. It is very hard to go back. Never impossible, but it's much more important if you got in one of those series and it's what you want to do, that you work hard to make to the associate level position, and that you go through those steps in the 7 years that you have. Because after that, you do not get more time except of exceptional circumstances. So yeah, acceleration is good. We all want to be seen as doing our work and doing it excellent. But as Jeff said, it has to be reserved for important times. And we have to always make a plan about what's important to us and what we want to fight for.
Yeah, I'll say I started out as HS Clinical, where I stayed for about 4 years and then changed to ClinX. And my motivation to moving to ClinX was actually getting access to the MOP loan, which I used to buy the house I still live in. That was back when I was at UCLA faculty in 1995, so quite a while ago. And when I came out of my training and took my first job, I had a CV that was listed my name, and that's pretty much all it had on there. So I had to then earn my credibility and produce academically. And then at the right time, I actually had one accelerated action. It wasn't a promotion, but it was a merit. And I think there is an opportunity if you happen to have a burst of important accomplishments, right? Whether it's high impact papers or grants or studies that you run, that's the time you take advantage of that and get your accelerated merit. But thinking ahead to what's going to be coming next to make sure you don't end up with a chasm after that. So I think it has to be well thought out, but I think there is a value in getting that at the right time in your career.
All right, I think we should do one last question so we stay on time here, and that is about managing work-life balance, or at the leadership level. I see Dr. Cunningham is laughing. Is it possible to have work-life balance when you're a leader?
You have to try. It is a challenge, but you have to try. You have to do, you have to spend time with family. You have to do what makes you happy. So if it's gym time or reading books or going for walks or gardening, but you have to have something. If you try to work all the time, you will not be successful. It is just a constant challenge. I have not mastered it. I'm not sure I ever mastered it, but I tried.
I would say it's essential that you try and hopefully accomplish it. And I would say that a little bit depends on the mindset, right? So I'll give you a little story, which was that I would go on vacation. Didn't matter where I'm going to Europe, I'm going whatever. And it would actually, in the beginning of my career as a leader, it used to drive my wife crazy because I would go on my email every day for about an hour, right? And that just would work for me, right? I would find a period of time when I had nothing else I wanted to do, and I wanted to get that done so that it wasn't waiting for me when I got back after my vacation. That was much more important to me. And then after a couple of years of me doing that, she realized that although that would never have worked for her with her personality, it worked for me perfectly. And so then she very much supported that. So everybody has to find their own definition of work-life balance. You've got to be able to separate at times, but everybody's got to have their own definition of what that means. And I think it's critically important. I try to show that by the way I act. I try to also support that in the people that report directly to me to make sure that we always support a work-life balance.
I think you made one good point there as well. You made many good points, but one of the good points there was it's about perspective. So, I mean, at least you're on a vacation. Is it 24 hours a day of vacation? No, you spent an hour or two doing email, but you're off with your family doing something. Dr. Bota, work-life balance?
I think that work-life balance needs a strategy. I think that if you let it to the luck of the draws, I'm going to take vacation next year, I'm going to read tomorrow. It's the same one which letting your career to take its own direction. being a leader means being also a leader of your life. And if that is making the right decisions at work and when is the time to close your computer, or if that is deciding to work in vacation for a few hours, so when you come back, you are not overwhelmed. But reminding yourself that you are here because you are also important to your family, to your community, that at the time that you don't take good care of yourself, you're not going to be able to take good care of anybody else, including our patients, or to serve in our positions. So it takes effort. It's much easier to not think about it. But with effort, I think occasionally, many times, we can have good life-work balance. And us as leader, I think it's part of our responsibility also to model a healthy life-work balance and share our approach about it, including turning our cell phone off occasionally. That is always helpful.
I want to thank our esteemed panelists for taking the time out of their very, very busy lives to share their wisdom, their thoughts about leadership in academic medicine. I think this was our most well-attended session since we started monthly on Mondays. So thank you. There's a lot of interest in this topic. So thank you, Dr. Cunningham. Thank you, Dr. Bota, and thank you, Dean Stamos, for your time and your wisdom. And thank you to all the faculty who joined today. We know how busy you all are, but we can see that there's a great interest in this. And I think key points everyone said today: be a leader of your life, as Dr. Bota said, Dr. Dean Stamos said, take every opportunity you can, and be strategic, as Dr. Cunningham said. So thank you all. And please do fill out the survey that will be sent to you so we can continue this programming and continue to improve it. So have a wonderful evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much, Dr. Parekh, for putting this all together, and for all of your colleagues who helped you.
Have a good night.